Hello and welcome to Roundtable. For years now, some Muslims in Britain have complained that they're being specifically targeted by the UK's controversial anti-terrorism strategy, PREVENT. The British government says the aim of the policy is to stop people becoming either terrorists or supporters of terrorism. But PREVENT has been consistently criticised as being Islamophobic. Is the idea no longer fit for purpose? Good to have you along. I'm David Foster. The PREVENT policy was first introduced in the UK as part of an overall change of approach following the 9/11 attacks. The idea was to stop the radicalisation of individuals before that happened. Sarah Morris reports.
Since becoming law in 2011, PREVENT has been criticised by human rights groups for curtailing civil liberties. According to the NGO Muslim Engagement and Development, Muslims are 8 times more likely to be referred to PREVENT than non-Muslims. While Muslim communities and human rights groups have made it clear they have little or no confidence in the policy, it does have its supporters, including influential figures within counter-terrorism. Dame Sarah Khan, former Counter-Extremism Commissioner who now advises the government on social cohesion, says PREVENT is being hampered by political correctness. She claims the fear of being called a racist hampers the ability to avert deadly extremism. PREVENT will be reviewed in July for the first time in 3 years by the newly installed independent reviewer William Shawcross. Although Amnesty International and 17 other organisations have condemned the appointment of Shawcross, accusing him of Islamophobic views. In 2013, he claimed Europe and Islam is one of the greatest, most terrifying problems of our future. So, with Shawcross reviewing PREVENT, will it strengthen the government's program or just give more fuel to the critics?
Let's talk to Nicola Ben Yehia. And Nicola, I've got a note here that says how I'm stopping children being radicalised after mine was. What work are you doing? We'll talk about Raheem, your son, in just a moment, but what work are you doing now?
I actually work with families who've been impacted or affected by sort of extremism groups, and that can be Islamist-inspired groups or increasingly last probably couple of years, I think increasingly more far-right extremist narratives and groups emerging. So I really help them sort of through the psychological and emotional sort of journey they go on, because being a trained counsellor, that's what I specialise in.
When you say families that have been impacted by, do you mean because their offspring have gone off and done something that's come to the attention of the authorities, they've gone away, perhaps lost their lives as your son did? Is that the sort of thing that you're confronting on a weekly basis?
Not necessarily. To be honest with you, it can be just parents or families or friends who are just concerned about an individual that may be displaying sort of signs or saying things that kind of seem a little bit off. So it could be just kind of almost validate or clarifying concerns like that. Or it can be on the other spectrum where somebody has been imprisoned for a sort of terrorist offences, or have again joined ISIS or Al-Qaeda and have lost somebody.
Okay, so and what I'm wondering is, what is the difference between what you are doing and what PREVENT is trying to do?
It's not any different, to be honest with you. I think if anything, it's more of when I set this up, I just wanted to make a difference and do my part as an individual after what had happened to us as a family. I think the only difference with myself and PREVENT is that sometimes having a community project where you're already embedded in the community and society and you're well respected, you may be more approachable because again, sometimes they just want to have that sort of maybe off the cuff dialogue or conversation because they're just not quite sure, and it's quite nerve-wracking actually initially.
It's a little bit more informal, if you like. Do you think if Rashid had come to the attention of authorities like PREVENT, he wouldn't have gone to Syria, he wouldn't have joined ISIS, he might not have lost his life? Did he fall through the net?
He didn't fall through the net because he wasn't within their kind of in their eyesight. He wasn't on their radar as such. However, I do feel that, if other practitioners or people around him had more of an understanding of what to look for and how radicalization worked, I think maybe things could have been picked up. I wouldn't have been sort of having to sift through it all on my own. And I think that was the difficulty. I think had I had reached out to somebody at the time and kind of maybe had that initial chat or dialogue with somebody, I really, truly, truly believe, and I'll say it till this day, I really believe that Rashid would still be alive today, had he had the right intervention at the right time. Unfortunately, it got to a place where it was too late for him.
Okay, because people who do involve themselves in such activities can be very good at hiding it, and therefore they wouldn't want an organisation such as Prevent, or indeed his mother, to be aware of it. But you think that could have saved his life. Are there things that you think can be done now that would help children who might be, well, he's a young man, wasn't he, 18, I think, help them in a way that he wasn't helped, Rashid wasn't helped?
I think back in 2015, when this happened, it was very, very different. I don't think we were rolling out Prevent or sort of rolling out the legal requirement as we are today. I think certainly now what I see is more Prevent training, more understanding of the similarities between gang-related or sexual exploitation and how groomers recruit people into extremist groups. So I think we're in a very different position today, but thankfully, but there still needs to be a lot to be done as well.
Nicola, thank you for your time.
No problem. Thank you.
Pleased to say with me in the studio we have Leila Etelhaj, Director at Prevent Watch and Senior Caseworker supporting people impacted by Prevent. On Skype in London, David Otto, Prevent Serious Organised Crime Specialist, travels mostly to Africa to try and enact policies there, deigned to take people away from terrorism and extremism. And in The Hague, Richard McNeill-Wilson, Research Fellow in Counter-Extremism Studies, Leiden University. There you have it. A mother, grieving mother, even though it's 7 years ago. Of course she's grieving. She says, had her son been talked to by Prevent, he'd be alive.
So I think, of course, when it comes to anybody losing their child, they would like to think that there is a preventative measure to stop that loss. And of course, we have heartfelt sympathies for anyone in her situation who has lost somebody abroad. But the truth is that there is no evidence to suggest that had Prevent intervened, he wouldn't be there. And in fact, there is evidence to suggest that we have at least 7 terror convicts who have had Prevent involved in their lives before they carried out terror attacks.
Well, I'm sure that is quite provable, but what you can't prove is that had Prevent not intervened, they wouldn't have done exactly the same thing.
But Prevent was in existence for almost a decade when her son travelled to Syria in 2015.
Which means what? He's
means
clever at evading the detection of the authorities, etc., etc. It doesn't mean that Prevent didn't do its job. It just meant that he was able to sidestep it.
Well, it means that public sector workers were already aware of how to spot signs of extremism and radicalisation. They had already received training, although it had not been put on a statutory duty at that point until after 2015 onwards. And it means that essentially you can't predict, and we have no evidence to suggest that we can predict who's going to go on to commit any crime.
But does that mean that Prevent is no good at all, or that it just needs to improve and people in it need to do their job a little bit better?
Well, if we think of the objective of Prevent, it's to stop terror offences. And we haven't been shown any evidence to suggest it actually stops terror offences.
How can you prove that it hasn't?
Well, it's not for me to prove that it hasn't. I haven't been shown any evidence that it has. And what I have got is at least 600 cases to show how traumatic it is.
Okay. Richard, let me ask you the same question, because I know you've said that there's no evidence that it is stopping terror. How do you know that? Even if it stopped 1, even if it stopped 10 cases, you just wouldn't know, would you?
Yeah, I mean, we're talking about a program that really has had very little kind of proper review into it, and current reviews have been spiked and carried out extremely badly. as has been pointed out, there's very little evidence that the current approach to Prevent is preventing individuals from being drawn to terrorism. And actually, even practitioners are concerned about this and are disconnecting the program from terrorism and focusing more on concepts of extremism. And this is an even vaguer notion, a notion not founded in any legal basis, one highly contested in research, and that's led the program down a path into operating in what practitioners call a pre-criminal space. Now,
well, surely it's better to stop somebody taking drugs in the first place than to try and wean them off it in the long run. If they are preventing people from wanting to become part of extreme organisations, that's good, isn't
it? the stopping individuals from engaging in irregular kind of violence is good, yes. But Prevent is not the way of doing that. There are various other ways shown in different contexts in which that can happen.
Give us a few examples. Give us a few examples, because you both said the same thing. You don't think it's working. But tell us, if there are other ways of doing it, what those other ways are.
Prevent is focused on ideology, on challenging the link between ideology and terrorism, of which there's very little evidence. It's focused on incoherent notions of British values as linked to extremism, which has led to this kind of focus on racial profiling and Muslims. And it uses language of safeguarding and vulnerabilities, right? And this is language that's used in relation to treating trauma, child abuse, and sexual abuse, but it's being pushed into a security context. And extremism is not the same, and it's not comparable to these kinds of abuse, because safeguarding doesn't involve policing, doesn't have a security center within it that's entirely inappropriate and dangerous to serious safeguarding. And at the same time, actual safeguarding is being eroded from Prevent at the same time.
Okay, so let me come back to my original question, was you don't think it works, and you said you got better ideas. What are they?
There are other approaches that have been focused on sort of joined up approaches that look at.
Well, by joined up, you mean better. So what is your better?
No. By joined up, I mean ones that use mental health, proper mental health support, proper societal support, look at social exclusion, look at communities and support communities in ways that are not focused on ideology and not focused on safeguarding, which is what Prevent does. There are ways in which this can be done, and there's research being currently done by academics. There's alternative options that have been put forward by academics, by researchers, focus on better democratic engagement, on supportive young people, on making sure that young people don't slip through the net. But it's not ones that are focused on changing their ideologies, and not ones that use this kind of safeguarding paradigm, which Prevent is rooted within fundamentally.
Okay, David, let me come to you. If those ideologies are ones that lead people to extremes, then you would want to prevent them from going to that ideology rather than trying not to attack their ideology. But my point here is that you've got two people who've spent a lot of time examining these cases, and they say it needs to change.
Yes, I think, I think the biggest problem that we have is that, we're still criticizing Prevent from the 2006, lens. Prevent has moved on from that. Of course, originally, the whole idea was that, it was stigmatizing the Muslim community. And then we had this idea that, it threatened free speech, it was securitization of Britain, that it doesn't prevent people from, committing acts of terrorism. But these are all criticisms that, were valid, before. But there has been a number of reviews, and as my co-panelist mentioned in the first place, we now have the Prevent Duty of 2016. But
I was challenging both of these two to show me how they could say it hadn't worked. I'll challenge you in this instance to show me how it has prevented acts of terror and extremism.
I think, yes, that's a very good point, and I'm going to answer that, very clearly.
If you wouldn't mind answering it now, because it's a limited time program.
Yes, I mean, the way that Prevent works is that when it does prevent, people don't see it. People cannot actually know that someone has been prevented from committing an act of terrorism. Now, the new strategy that has been added onto that is to ensure that there is strategic communication in the way that successes of Prevent are reported within communities. And that itself is to demonstrate how successful Prevent has been. And that is the new way that we are now implementing Prevent to counter the argument that, you cannot see Prevent works.
Okay, I'm going to quote Ben Wallace, former Security Minister of the United Kingdom, now, as we know, Defence Minister, who says Prevent is not about singling out any particular group or ideology, but is similar to other forms of safeguarding carried out every day by social workers, teachers, and police. I'm proud we have helped divert hundreds of people away from posing a real threat and put them back on the path of living a fulfilling, law-abiding life. You don't believe that groups are not singled out, which is what he's saying. You think they are targeted. What's your evidence for that?
Well, recently we received data from the Home Office about where prevent money is being injected, and these are called prevent priority areas. And essentially 75% of Muslims in the UK live within a prevent priority area. Now, previously, back in 2014, the last time this data was actually revealed about who was receiving prevent funding, it was acknowledged that prevent funding was distributed based on the demographics, based on how many Muslims lived in an area. This time round, when we received it, and this was just a few months ago when we received the new data, the new prevent priority areas, there are 42 boroughs which received this extra injection of funding. We weren't given a reason. They didn't want to reveal why and how they selected these areas. But we can only go on the basis of what we know in terms of the demographics currently, and we can see clearly that a disproportionate amount of Muslims live in these areas.
Why disproportionate? I mean, they're putting money where they think the possible problems are.
In Muslim areas.
Yes.
So they're suggesting that if you're Muslim, you should be securitized.
They are suggesting that there are a lot of Muslims who they might like to keep an eye on.
So then you're basically suggesting that you are happy to securitize all Muslims.
And there are also a lot of white men, right-wing extreme groups as well, that are being targeted.
That's exactly what some people use to justify prevent and say, well, it's fine because it's not just discriminating against Muslims. We're also looking at far-right extremism, but we're not campaigning for equal opportunities of oppression at all. What we're saying is that prevent doesn't work. It's causing a huge deal of trauma to children. I mean, over half of the people referred to prevent are children. Okay, this is by the Home Office's own admission of their statistics. Half of the people referred are children. And we don't know what the impact of that. We have UN special rapporteurs who are saying that this could be leading to radicalization. The stigmatization of these communities could be actually leading to radicalization.
I did notice that one rapporteur who came to this country and was very forthright in what she said, encapsulated everything that was wrong with Britain and prevent during the course of an 11-day visit here, which is hardly representative, in my opinion. David, I wanted to come to you and ask you about your stepped in, stop out campaign, because you take this to countries such as Nigeria, Chad, Cameroon, Niger, that belt across the area just above the Sahel in Africa, or around about the Sahel. What evidence have you got, because it's based on prevent, that it seems to work?
Yes, the step-in, step-out strategy is a research-based strategy. That, in addition, comes to answer the question of my co-panelist. When you do target communities, it's based on research. You do carry out an assessment of local communities. You do a crime profiling. You do a target audience assessment.
But your model is the Prevent UK one, isn't it? And have you tweaked it in any way for African countries?
The thing is, Prevent doesn't work, as it is in all communities or all countries. We always make sure it is tweaked. It then meets the communities and individuals that, assessed.
And do you find that it's demographically as biased as Layla is suggesting in those particular countries, that it may target the Muslim population and a largely Christian population, et cetera, et cetera?
I think this was a historical challenge. We don't have that challenge anymore because we do explain to the local communities, we engage them, so that they themselves are involved in the pre-assessment in order for us to develop our prevent intervention. We do not bring, from somewhere else, strategies that are not supported or bought in by the local communities. So I think this is where the biggest problem with the UK Prevent was. It did not involve, stakeholder local communities, and therefore they rejected it and then tempted, some kind of stigmatization.
Later, I'm going to come to you in a moment, giving you some warning on this, to talk to you about your suggestion that it's being moved from council control to the intelligence services control. This was supposedly a leak. We don't know whether it's true or not, but I'll ask you about that in just a moment. But I wanted to ask you, Richard, if I could, after reading this from Amnesty International, we and other governmental organizations have long raised concerns about the discriminatory and anti-Muslim impact of Prevent and its potential to violate core human rights. You told our producer that communities, Muslim communities in particular, have lost faith in Prevent. Did those communities ever have faith?
I think certainly there's been parts of different communities in the UK that have, of course, wanted to deal with these issues and have gone into dealing with these issues with in good faith and have tried to engage with Prevent in the past. With the review and with the leaks from the review and the way in which the independent review has been handled by the government, it has increasingly alienated not just Muslim communities, but a variety of different faith communities, human rights groups, community organizations, cultural organizations, who have lost faith and have lost patience with the way in which the government is conducting Prevent and conducting counter-extremism. Critics have been smeared by Prevent practitioners as being Islamist agitators and their ideological bedfellows by Prevent practitioners. Muslim charities have been specifically targeted by leading conservative politicians because of their concerns over Prevent. And when concerns have been brought up about Prevent, they've not been dealt with properly.
So are you suggesting that post-review Prevent is scrapped, or that it is just adapted to take in some of your concerns and some of Layla's concerns?
I think personally there's a very strong argument for Prevent being scrapped completely. I think there are plenty of other opportunities and other ways in which this can be dealt with.
Quick one, David, yeah?
Yeah, I think that's a bit over the way to suggest, even to the slightest point, Prevent should be scrapped. We couldn't confuse some of the challenges that Prevent has faced, some of the operational, challenges that it has faced in communities to then suggest in any way that Prevent should be scrapped. Because the difficulty is that no one can tell you what else works. They can simply say to you, scrap Prevent, but they won't put forward to you what strategy works. Any other strategy that they suggest is still part of Prevent.
Okay, Layla, I want to ask you this. Do you think we need something like it? And then I'll ask you about the spooks and the spies.
Well, I think everyone would agree that prevention is better than cure in every context, right? But what we have is Prevent that actually doesn't prevent terrorism, right? So we don't have something that prevents terrorism but has some teething issues, or prevents terrorism but is discriminatory and needs work. And this is why there is a strong argument for it to be scrapped.
But you still need something like it.
Well, we already have.
Or do you just sort of say, well, it'll take care of itself?
The counter-terrorism strategy is not built on Prevent. It has three other arms. There's Pursue, there's Protect, there's Prepare. And Pursue is essentially a lot like what the current leaks are suggesting Prevent is going to be.
Which is where you suggest that it'll be taken over as the overarching body by the intelligence services rather than councils, local councils, boroughs.
Yeah. This is essentially one of the leaks. One of the leaks was that it will be taken away from local authority control and given over to security services. And of course, one of the major dangers in that is that we won't see any amendments or anything changing, any of the concerns addressed about Prevent. What we will see is we will see more opaqueness around Prevent, because then when you try to access data like we have with many of our clients, and this is the way we're able to help them in terms of obtaining accountability for what has happened to them, we get a lot of that from subject access
requests.
requests.
People sometimes leak things that aren't actually true,
Of course.
simply to make people get scared. Yeah, who wants to talk? David, is that you?
Yeah, sorry, I hate to interrupt my co-panelists, but I don't think this in any way going to make any sense for the government to move Prevent from local communities and then hand it to the intelligence service. It doesn't work like that.
They're already doing it, aren't they? The military intelligence peoples or the MI5 or whoever it is, they're already looking at people they believe to be extremists.
No, they're not. They're not handing over Prevent to the intelligence services. What perhaps referring to is situations where individuals that are suspected to be involved in some form of terrorism plans and everything the information is being shared with some of the intelligence services for kind of a proactive surveillance. It is not that. Prevent is being handed over to intelligence services.
Quick one, Richard. Sorry, we're running out of time. This review was conducted after a lot of pressure from people who didn't like the way that it was going. Do you think whatever recommendations are made that they will be acted upon, or are they going to be pushed into, as they say, the long grass, because we've got a lot of other things to worry about, such as the war in Ukraine, the rising cost of living, energy prices, Brexit, Northern Ireland Protocol. Bye-bye the Prevent report and changes.
No, I think it's likely that actually quite a lot of these recommendations will be implemented because they're quite advantageous to the Home Office and the way the Home Office is responding to concerns around terrorism and extremism. I think the review has largely been taken over by some quite reactionary voices, both within and around government, to try and shift the dial away from looking at this, what has been called by the right wing, political correctness of Prevent, which supposedly looks at Islamically justified and far-right violence, and to shift that more to focus on Muslims again. There's been a targeting of critical voices of Prevent, particularly focused on Muslim groups. And I think there'll be a lot more focus as well on targeting forms of activism, on punishment and non-compliance with Prevent. And that's sort of, as Leila has pointed out, the strengthening of Prevent and that centralisation of processes within the Home Office.
Okay, there we must leave it. Listen, thank you very, very much indeed. Good to have you all on the show. Thank you wherever you're watching this edition of Roundtable. We hope you return next time and the time after that. From me, David Foster, goodbye for now.